What a weekend of finals footy. The Lions and the Cats creep home by under a kick. The Demons are upset by the Swans, and the Dockers come home like a steam train to defeat the Dogs. Welcome to the finals so far, brought to you by Amy Kane. Where do we start? Let's start at the MCG today. Geelong just getting over the line against Collingwood. In some ways, they out-Collingwood.
Yeah, it was tough to decide which was the big story, but this was it. This is Jordan De Goey kicking the first goal of the last quarter. He was awesome. He had 8 clearances and 9 tackles, 2 goals for the day, but they just kept coming, Geelong, and in the end, it was that man, Jeremy Cameron, with Gary Rohan, who we'll get to, but Cameron was involved in everything. 12 score involvements today. From his play, and Selb was really important. They managed his game time, started him on the bench in quarters 1, 2 and 3. He started the last quarter, but Collingwood, as they have done from half-back, were awesome with their ability to transition the ball. Jordan De Goey kicks a big goal there. And look at it, you think, not again. Zach Tui won a big contested mark across half-back, drove it deep, and Gary Rohan, with the performance of his life, took that mark and then kicked that absolute laser beam which split the middle from about 55 metres out. And then he nearly mucked this up.
He did. The Pies missed some opportunities as well. Jack Crisp kicked it behind, which levelled the score. Josh Dacos, yes, he was off balance, but kicked it out in the full on a running set shot on goal. And then Max Holmes there kicking the winner. Geelong wins by 6 points. They progress to a preliminary final. Collingwood goes into a semi-final. So much talk leading into this one about Gary Rohan. He's our Saturday star, thanks to Taylor Made. Given his finals record, he was awesome. Kicked 3 goals and set the tempo early with his pressure.
Right from the start, he was sharp. His defensive pressure was there. How's that kick from Jeremy Cameron? His ball use today was extraordinary. That's one of the best kicks you'll see all year, but his ability to do this, I mean, you let him run and jump at the footy, he can do that, and he can at times look like a superstar in the game, but on the flip side, he can be so inconsistent and go missing. Not the case today. There was a bit of pressure coming in, and for obvious reasons, because his performances have been underwhelming. You see it there. That is his recent record in finals, what he's delivered versus what he delivered today. His coach, Chris Cott, was quite defensive of him during the week and selected him and backed him in, and rightly so. He was the first person he went over and hugged in the change rooms after the game on the back of that match-winning performance. So you're thrilled for him to see him stand up on the MCG in front of 91,500 people and decide the game basically off his own boot.
Some interesting scenes after the game. Collingwood don't lose too many close ones. They haven't this season. This was Craig McRae speaking about the reaction to losing this one.
Well, we want to act like winners. I must admit, the siren goes and there's half a dozen of our guys laying on the ground. For me, that's not a winner. That's acting like a loser. We lost the game. We're not losers. So I just made that point. We're here to win this thing. We lost the game, but we're not losers. There is a difference. I said that for the lifetime that I'm sitting in this chair, that maybe barring a grand final, if we don't win, don't lay on the ground. Don't lay on the ground.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's strange, yeah. It's a strange thing to be picky with your players about. I mean, it's one of the most ferocious, high-pressure games you've ever seen, and your natural reaction as a player is often, the despair of it, and you drop to the ground. Then you quickly get yourself up and you shake hands. So of all the things he could have been picky for, today it could have been, the breakdown in their defensive structure, which led to the goal late in the game where Cameron and Rohan dropped that mark that we just saw. But to be picky on that, I thought it was just, quite odd.
He'll have some headaches on his hands in terms of selection. Taylor Adams going down. His season's over. Tore the groin off the bone. That's the fear from Collingwood. Just coming back from a groin injury, missed 4 weeks.
Yeah, nasty. It's a warning for coaches. You can get seduced by picking your big star players in finals, but it doesn't often work if they're underdone. And clearly, he was still suffering the effects of that groin injury, and it just went bang. Now, his season is over, clearly, and a really nasty one. The long-term effects of that, who knows, but really devastating to see him finish the game on the bench like that in the arms of the trainers.
We'll head to Optus Stadium now. Quite a remarkable result. The Dockers trailed by 41 points midway through the second quarter and just fought back from absolutely nowhere to steal this elimination.
You wouldn't read about it. So these are some of the big last quarter moments. There's Jai Amos with that goal there, just his second game, so it was a real risk to pick him, but they needed something because their forward line has been dysfunctional all year. Here's the 50-metre penalty. You're going to see Vandermeer run through the protected area and cost his team a goal there. And then this chase from Friedrich. They're small forwards with their speed, and they just got after the Western Bulldogs from quarter time. That leads to that goal. Look at the celebration. Walters kicked 3. He was terrific today. This one, how good is that? And he went back and kicked that late in the game, and you thought there may be a few more to this. So Driscoll lays that tackle, gets holding the ball, and hasn't he kicked some big goals in recent times? This one splits the middle. You love his celebration and the fans. Record crowd for the Dockers at Optus Stadium. And they are home on the back of one of the most remarkable wins you have ever seen. Their biggest quarter-time deficit in club history, and they did it in the final. So the resilience that was shown by Justin Longmuir's men today was extraordinary. What a performance. I thought that game was done at quarter-time.
They kicked the first 6 goals of the game, did the Western Bulldogs. The change-up after quarter-time was so drastic. Here are the stats. The Dogs just led in every single category. 28 more disposals, 8 more inside 50s, and then the turnaround from the Fremantle was remarkable.
Yeah, it was a smashing. I mean, the Fremantle just weren't there, and maybe the Western Bulldogs got ahead of themselves at quarter time and thought, how easy is this going to be when it waltz through to the second week of the finals? Not the case, because this Dockers side is hardened. They're hard to score against, they're hard to play against, and that proved to be the case today again. So what a moment in their club history. I mean, they've had some big finals victories under Ross Lyon, but that would be right up there today. And for the Western Bulldogs, well, you're 19 points up at the grand final. Third term last year, you lose by 74 points. And today, you're up by 41 during the second quarter. You concede 11 out of the last 13 goals and lose. So they've got some big questions that they need to answer at the Western Bulldogs, and Luke Beveridge will be under significant pressure heading into next season.
You mentioned the Dogs potentially getting ahead of themselves here. Have a look for this from Zane Cordy when they are 40 points up. There's a moment here where he's going to a second gamer in Jai Amos, and I don't know, but is it a little point at the scoreboard? Because it came back to bite him if so.
Not sure what else he's pointing to there. I think he's pointing to the scoreboard at 42-2, and that's an embarrassing moment for him, and it's an embarrassing moment for his teammates to go back and review that vision when you choke up that sort of lead. So, yeah, not the sort of stuff you want to be highlighted for.
2 players from Fremantle that have driven their entire success this season in Andrew Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong. The first time they've been on the big stage, they were the 2 that brought them back into this game when they were so far down.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is the body of work that's been there for Fremantle, and this is the prioritising of youth. We know that a few years ago, Mundy was moved out of the midfield. He went to half forward. In other areas, Fife's the same. To give these guys the midfield minutes, and then you get the dividends now in your first final in a long time, and this is what they produce. So, Sarong 33 with 10 clearances, 6 tackles and a goal, the complete game. Brayshaw's done this all year, voted by his peers as the best player in the competition. Another 32. He kicked a goal. It was really important that those midfielders were able to push forward and score, which they did. A lot of these possessions front half of the ground, we know how difficult it has been for Fremantle to score. So they've led the charge. Brayshaw is clearly their next captain, and he laid a big tackle in the closing minutes of this game, which has just basically summed up the season that he has had. The best two-way runner, I think, from any midfielder this year.
What made this comeback all the more special is that there were so many players from Fremantle that were doing it for the first time. So Fremantle only had 4 players that had played in a final: James Aish, Rory Lobb, Michael Walters and David Mundy. Walters and Mundy, the only 2 that have played one for the Dockers. The Dogs only had 2 players that hadn't played a final.
And it looked like that early, didn't it? You thought that lack of experience was really going to hurt them, and you thought, oh no, this could be an absolute disaster for Fremantle here. And there's not really any excuses for the Western Bulldogs. I mean, Fremantle didn't have their captain, they didn't have their best key forward in Taberner out. The Western Bulldogs have wanted nothing from personnel reasons, so they've got to dive deep into what has gone wrong with them this year, and it starts with their midfield is so unaccountable, and they just don't want to defend the opposition, and that cost them again after quarter time today with conceding 11 out of the last 13 goals.
We'll get to our Amy Clangers now, and we'll stay at Optus Stadium to begin this one, because Cody Waitman kicked this goal, which continued a run of Dogs goals in the first quarter. But I tell you what, the umpire nearly got in the way.
Oh, he just got out of the way. We'll have another look at this, because I reckon the umpire actually did well to get out of the way. Look, he just leans back and rolls back just there to get out of the way, and thank goodness. Hoskin Elliott here, look, 6 minutes to go in the game, trying to drive that forward. Instead, he kicks it into the 7th row of the stand, so not ideal for Will there.
So this is a great piece of play from Robbie Fox. 2 pretty remarkable smothers. Sums up Melbourne's night and away. There's one from Robbie Fox, then he gets the second. But I reckon whoever was in charge of the lights show at the MCG thought that they kicked a goal, because you can't really see it here, but at the ground, it was a remarkable experience. The light show goes off as though it's a goal.
And speaking of pressing the wrong button, Brisbane won this game, not Richmond, and the man that needed to press the song played the Richmond theme song.
Yeah, that wasn't a great moment. Dimmer was already pretty upset at that one, and he stayed upset. We'll stay at the MCG now, where Sydney upset Melbourne to book its spot in a preliminary final. The D's were their own worst enemies, though. They conceded 70 points from turnover.
And these are some of those. You don't see this very often from Melbourne. Pretty methodical with their ball use. So that 70 points that they conceded is the most they've conceded off turno in 2022. Now, part of that is clearly Sydney's elite pressure, and they were relentless for 4 quarters. And that was really the difference in the sides. Sydney were able to sustain that forward half pressure, turn the ball over from that, and not only turn it over, go back and score. Dylan Stevens kicked that bomb. I mean, it's been a bit of a breakout second half of the year for Dylan Stevens, high draft pick from a number of years ago, but what a finish there. And it was really their lesser lights. There was nothing from Franklin. Heaney was quiet, Warner was quiet, Logan McDonald couldn't get involved, but players like Jake Lloyd bobs up and kicks multiple goals for the first time this year, and really important role players got it done. And you can see the numbers here from their forward half pressure, which led to those turnovers.
And you said Heaney was quiet, but he still had an impact in terms of how he was able to impact the game from a pressure standpoint. 4 tackles inside 50. This is a similar blueprint to that they followed earlier in the year when they upset Melbourne at the MCG. So they've managed to do it quite a few times now. You mentioned there that Lance Franklin was another one that was quiet. He was well held by Stephen May, who was just about best on ground. I felt this was a pretty pivotal moment in the game, and Simon Goodwin referenced it post-match as well. Just the ill discipline from Melbourne. They gave away a number of 50-metre penalties, downfield free kicks that resulted in goals. They were 16 points up here, Melbourne, and it was 2 straight incidents from Stephen May that resulted in the Swans goal. Within a couple of minutes, they were 6 points down.
Yeah, you'd love for the umpires just to let the players play and not to be too involved in moments like that. They both free kicks, I don't think, were there. I mean, that's just a nudge in the back that would happen 20 times a game for a defender on a forward, and Franklin actually initiates that contact. May is allowed to surely protect himself in that moment, but you're right, it did flip the momentum of the game, and from that point Sydney were able to control it. But just on Stephen May, bright spot for Melbourne. That is as good a defensive game as you'll ever see. Not only did he quell Franklin and keep him to perhaps his quietest game since his first 1 or 2 years, Buddy Franklin, that's how poor he was. May was able to mark everything that went towards that contest. So I don't know if there is a match-up in future between these two teams. Buddy Franklin's got to get on the move way more than just call it in long like he tried to do on Friday night.
It was the first time he's been held goalless in 35 matches. The last player to hold him goalless was Stephen May as well. Talking about some of the Sydney lesser lights, Tom Hickey, this is his 4th club. This is almost the best basement bargain buy from a trade period standpoint you'll see. He was awesome again on Friday.
Yeah, how good, because when you think of Ruckman, you think of Gawn and Jackson as a duo, and this is what he did to them. Now, it wasn't a fully dominant performance. Gawn still had his moments. Jackson was incredibly quiet and had a poor night, but let's look at Hickey. 17 disposals, big numbers for a Ruckman, 5 clearances. He was able to push forward on Max Gawn there and kick a really important goal late in that 3rd term. And Sydney ended up winning the clearances, and their midfield, when you put them up against Melbourne's pound for pound and on paper, probably had no right to do that. So he was emotional after the game, has had some family issues this week and ducked off pretty quickly home to Sydney. So under adversity, a really strong performance in the ruck, because coming in, Gawn and Jackson were a big threat.
A big concern for Simon Goodwin heading into next week's semi-final against Brisbane will be the fitness of Christian Petrarca. Now, he has a fracture in his leg after that incident there. He looks incredibly sore. It's a calf contusion, though, which is probably the bigger worry for him. It's really blown up after the game.
Yeah, so that's just moments after that, and it's early on in the game. So, I mean, there's a big impact on the game when he was going sort of half-pace. Good enough and strong enough and brave enough to get through the game. That's a good sign. They've got it diagnosed pretty quickly. Melbourne are incredibly confident that he'll play. Unusual for them to come out so strongly and definitively say he will play. So as long as he can manage the pain, they're saying there's no risk of further damage. So you'd expect him to be out there against Brisbane this weekend.
We head to the Gabba now, where it's an elimination final with everything on the line, and Brisbane just got over the line against the Tigers thanks to a last-gasp Joe Danaher goal and a bit of controversy.
What a game. 32 goals, absolute shootout, 17 lead changes. Jack Revolt kicked 2 goals in the last quarter from basically the exact same position, and it felt like Richmond were going to get it done. I thought Brisbane's small forward, for me, I've said it 100 times on this show this year, but they got the best crop of small forwards in the game. There's the second of the revolt goals from a similar position, dying stages of that last quarter. And Giddy Coleman, if he's not the best kick in the competition, he's top 1, 2 or 3. Zach Bailey marks that. It's actually touched off the boot. How did they cough this up? We're going to have to look at this twice because it was 5-on-1 essentially. And that sort of sums up Richmond's year.
Joe Danaher was the only Brisbane Lions player even in the vicinity of the ball. So we'll pause it here. There's 5 Richmond players. And the 3 that actually contest the ball were uncontested in the end. You've got to get that over the line somehow. They can't do it. Joe Danaher kicks the goal. Richmond's season is over. One moment we didn't show in that package, though, was a Tom Lynch behind at the end of the day. The goal umpire signalled a goal initially, got checked and overturned. This is Damien Hardwick speaking about the incident after the game.
I can't make that call. Like, I sit there and I see the same vision you do. I see the umpire make a call and generally it's got to be definitive to overturn it. But I've used a GIF before, the common sense GIF. But anyway, I'm not bringing that back out.
It's pretty costly though. Would you like to see some...
Oh, really? Do you think so? Do you think it's really costly?
Would you like to see some investment into the technology over the summer?
Well, why don't we just let the umpires make the call? They're paid to do a job. Let them do a job. Or don't have them. One of the two. Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Your thoughts, Cam?
Well, I agree with him in part. I don't agree with the second part. Just leave it to the umpires. Because we've seen a number this year that the goal umpires would have got wrong if they hadn't gone upstairs. Now, the technology now with whether the ball hits the post or not is really sound, and that's worked a number of times this year. So we are better off with the technology. They just got the process wrong on Thursday night, and it should have been umpire's call because the evidence wasn't there to overturn it. That was the only mistake the ARC made. And if it's not definitive, you go with the goal umpire. That's the area of that decision that they got wrong. So I can understand his frustration with that.
I think they do need to find a way, and they might via tracking of the ball, but the ones that go over the post, they're the hardest ones. And if they don't have the technology at the moment to do it, I don't understand why they do actually go upstairs for that if they don't have the technology for it. But it's a question for another day. Lachie Neale was dominant in this one. One of the all-time great clearance performances. His equal career high of 15.
What a finals performance. I want you to notice how little body contact there is around the game's best clearance player at these stoppages. So Richmond, it's an arrogant performance from a midfield who backs their own structure in and didn't realise or want to know that if you nullify Lachie Neale, you pretty much win the game, and that's been the evidence of this year. Just look at the room that he's got to work in. They needed to study the tape of Winhager from St Kilda, who kept him to 16 disposals, Harms and Brayshaw the week before, that he got a lot of the footy, but not any sort of damage like he's doing here. So 18 ground ball gets, just a phenomenal midfielder's performance. So firstly, hats off to Lachie Neale. His game time was extraordinary. Hardly, if at all, came off for a rest in the second half. That's just unheard of for a midfielder. So phenomenal individual performance. But how you can have 44 list spots on your team and not have one dedicated to a tagger, it just continues to blow my mind. And essentially, that costs Richmond as much as a goal review cost them.
You mentioned his game time. You want to compare it to Dusty's because you mentioned it before that Dusty didn't have too much time on the ground coming back from injury.
Well, game's on the line. There's no tomorrow. And Dustin Martin's sitting on the bench for the last 10 minutes and they couldn't get him on or didn't want to get him on because Damien Hardwick, by his own admission, said that he was 80% leading into the game. So they essentially played with 21 players in that last quarter. And when he was on the ground, I mean, the time on the ground looks okay, but he's standing at full forward inside 50, not exerting himself at all. So it's like Taylor Adams. Don't play injured players in finals because it comes back to hurt you. And when you can't get one of the game's best players on the ground because of a lack of physical conditioning and you lose the game by 2 points, then that's on you for picking an injured player.
So he only had 3 disposals in the last quarter. Oscar McInerney goes down injured early with concussion, goes out of the game. Brisbane don't have another ruckman, so they turn to Dan McStay. You've been critical of him throughout the year, but this is probably his best performance of the season.
Terrific performance. Now, that's the concussion with Oscar McInerney. Now, he's not going to be back. He'll be in concussion protocols with a really nasty one. So what do? They went to Joe Danaher first, but then that didn't quite work. So Dan McStay was the one. It's just a terrific performance around the ground. And what it did do is it unsettled Richmond's defence because they were tall. They expected Hipwood and McStay and Danaher to be down there. And all of a sudden, McStay's in the ruck. So Richmond find themselves a bit too tall in defence. And then he can always do this with the forward craft. We've seen a bit of that this year. I mean, Finlayson and Dixon being terrific for Port Adelaide. And there's definitely a shift towards the mobile ruckman. I'm not sure he can do it again this week, particularly against Gawn and Jackson. So Darcy Fort is the obvious one to come in, but a nice string to his bow to have when he joins Collingwood next year.
Career high 23 disposals. We'll get to the finals to come because if this was a big weekend, it's going to be just as big next week. Melbourne, Brisbane, do or die semi-finals, and then Collingwood, Freo. These are going to be two crackers.
Yeah, initially, I mean, a lot to play out, but you'd back in the two teams that lost in the qualifying finals, wouldn't you? So Melbourne and Collingwood, you think, will be heavy favourites, both at the MCG, the ground that they know so well. It would take something extraordinary, I reckon, for Brisbane and Fremantle to cause an upset next weekend.
Big weekend of footy. It's going to be bigger from here on in. 3 weeks to go. Can't wait to review it all with you in the weeks to come. Kane, and we'll see you next week on AFL.com.au.